Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Built Environment webinar. My name is Callum. I'm the Access and Engagement Coordinator for Disability Equality Scotland. And today we're joined with David Wood. David Wood is with Plan Aid Scotland. David has been kind enough to give us a bit of his time today to deliver a short presentation. Uh, David is a chartered planner, and he's been working with Planning Scotland for the last 15 years. He focuses on providing planning advice to members of the public and community groups. Sorry, something just popped up on the screen, and helping them to engage with the planning system. Also on the delivery of training events, programs of the planning system. Sorry, some things have been popping up on my screen there. Yeah, so I'll give it away to David for a short presentation, and then we'll open up for a short discussion afterwards where we can hear your thoughts. Over to you, David.
Thanks, Callum, and to your organisation for inviting me. It's exactly the sort of thing we want to be doing and need to be doing, is reaching out to a range of groups such as yourselves and charities such as yourselves. So pleased to be here. Just intrigued before I start screen sharing, do people feel they know a lot about planning, a bit, or is it really confusing? Just if you're interested, if you're willing to give me a sort of verbal symbol of what you think. Yeah, you know, quite a bit. Yep, but medium. Good, just helps me sort of at the start. So I'm going to share, I will be sharing some slides, and there's going to be, Carol is going to be captioning what I say as we go along. Okay. So Callum, I won't really be looking at the chat. So if there's anything you think I need to know as we go along, please just come in and tell me. So yeah, I'm going to give you hopefully an insight into the Scottish planning system today. Slides. So yeah, this morning I'll just give you a very brief introduction to who we are, and I'll give you a short overview of the Scottish planning system and getting involved, and then we'll move into questions and discussion. Post away in the chat as we go along. If anything's completely unclear, I don't mind if it's a smallish group, if you want to interject or raise your hand, or you just speak and I'll try and explain, but we can't answer every question as we go along. We'll share the slides after, and of course you can also email me if you've got anything that we can't deal with today. We're not going to have half an hour to talk about a single planning application today. And I will just say at the start, what I'll be giving you in planning is probably quite high level. I think, you know, my view is you sort of need to understand that, but obviously people experience planning on the ground at a very, very local level as well. So on we go. Oops. Okay, so yeah, we've been around for 30 years now as a charity and also a social enterprise, and it's actually been celebrating 30 years since being founded as a charity this year. I won't read all this out to you, but it just shows you what our values and aims are. Essentially, top right, helping people navigate the planning system and shape the future of their places. Okay, and then next slide. So what do we actually do? We are funded by Scottish Government to run a planning advice service, and that is aimed at anyone, including access panels, community groups, individuals, business startups, and we'll always try to help you in an independent and impartial and confidential way. We're not going to be a lawyer or a consultant for you. We're trying to help you to move forward yourself, but you'll get a one-to-one service by phone or email. We do training events such as today. Sometimes we come out for, went round Scotland, commissioned by Disability Equality Scotland in 2018, running longer training events than this for access panels. But this is really an extension of our advice service today. We're always happy to come out for free and do, you know, 1 hour type events. We're very much a community engagement organisation. Sorry, there's a wee bit of text here, but we're committed to trying to get all voices into the planning system and have open and inclusive conversations. Often the community engagement projects we do are what I'm calling community-led plans, and there's lots of types of community-led plan. It's very much what the Scottish Government planning and community planning sort of direction of travel is, getting people interested in their own places. So on the right, we were commissioned with quite a good bit of funding by Applecross Community Trust. They were very concerned about the lack of affordable housing for elderly people and young people in the beautiful Applecross area. So we facilitated a program of lots of parties to essentially identify sites. And you can see on the bottom right, we were mapping out where things might go. And we've done lots and lots of projects like that. We also respond to Scottish Government planning and related consultations, which I lead on, and we have a subgroup that helps me with that. That's one that's live at the moment, actually a Transport Scotland one that I thought might be of interest to this group if you're not aware of it already, with a deadline of 29th March. We're always trying to respond from a people-focused perspective. And then just finally, we are a volunteer-based organisation. I'm a member of staff, I work full-time, but we've got a few hundred planners and other skills who help us provide advice and deliver projects. So that's who we are. So I'm just going to move in to give you an overview of Scottish planning system. Sounds like some of you might know some of this, but sometimes it's good just to hear it for a second time. And the system has changed quite a bit recently. So that's the purpose of planning, and believe it or not, that was never written in legislation until the current Planning Act from 2019. And I think the two key things there are managing development and use of land and trying to do that in the long-term public interest. And that is how planning decisions should be taken. It is a challenging one for planners to balance up sometimes private interests and public interests. Is that affordable housing more important than open space that people have been enjoying? It's a difficult one. So just to reflect back to how the system started, at one point we didn't have a planning system. So putting it quite simplistically, if you were a landowner, you could do what you wanted. There were early town planning and housing acts from the Victorian period onwards, but after World War II in 1947, alongside the establishment of the NHS, national planning system was established. And that responded to memories of slum living conditions. That's Glasgow tenement, famous photographs. Also very overcrowded cities, people living beside factories, belching out chemicals. So that was public health, public interest, trying to improve people's lives focus. But essentially it nationalised the right to develop land, which is quite an interesting way to look at it. If you wanted to build something, you had to apply for planning permission. You have to apply for planning permission. And it also introduced what we call forward planning, led to the new towns. That's probably Cumbernauld or Glenrothes, I think, unbelievable projects that the system achieved. And of course, the agenda of planning has changed over the years to focus on, from the 70s onwards, on public involvement, and then sustainability. Obviously, it has to respond to changing technology, mobile phones, wind power, and so forth. Just important to say at the moment, and this came up a bit in the workshops we did with access panels in 2018, there's stuff that is just not covered by planning. So roads stuff, parking, changing roads, traffic regulation orders. Building standards, I think you'll maybe know a bit about. It's completely separate legislation from planning. and deals with the safety and the quality of the building. Is it fire safe and so forth? Has it been built to the right standards? Often it follows alongside after you've got planning permission. Asset transfer, community right to buy is completely about land, but it separates the Community Empowerment Act. And then civil legal matters like land ownership, title deeds, planning is not going to look at. Just, we don't need to dwell on that, but I just thought it was important to say. So I'll just let you look at this. I think planning is important. It affects everyone. It's a key public service. I think people often don't feel positive about planning. I think people recognize NHS has problems, but do feel positive about it. But nonetheless, as I said, planning is, in the widest sense, trying to work in the long-term public interest. It does have big impacts on our day-to-day life and how we experience places, and it impacts on climate, health, well-being and economy, right down to people's personal houses. We get on our advice service all the time inquiries, do I need planning permission for a loft conversion? And the way I look at it, if a teenager gets their own bedroom or somebody gets a working from home study room, that is benefiting their life. And it's quite often they don't even need planning permission for those sort of minor works. So the places we live really impact on us. So won't dwell on this, but just to say you'll hear a lot from Scottish Government about placemaking alongside planning, and they really want a collaborative approach to delivery of places, and that's what they see as 6 qualities of successful places. You can learn more about that. I've put in some hyperlinks. If you want to learn more about anything hyperlinked, you can click when you get the slides. And then the thought you might like, you don't know if people know about the place standard. It's become a very popular tool for community engagement, conversations about places. NHS and Scottish Government developed it on the basis that places affect our health and well-being. So essentially you can get a group of people together and score using that matrix around these 13 themes. Don't have time to go into that in detail, but I hope that visualizes. You might find in one bit of Glasgow, the matrix would look very different, or to another bit of Glasgow, or children might have a different perspective, and young people. So it's just for your awareness. So again, lots of people involved in planning, starting with the Parliament who passed the legislation, which is drafted by Scottish Government, and of course the Council, the local authority, carry out planning functions. We'll look at that in a bit more detail, what they do. You've got specialist agencies who provide specialist planning advice to councils, government. Of course, we've got applicants and developers, from householders to business startups to the big housing developers, Sainsbury's, Tesco, wind farms. I gather most people here are members of access panels, so I'd say you're a stakeholder group with a specific viewpoint to put across. Just like the other groups that I've mentioned there, RSPB get very involved in planning as a charity, and community councils we'll talk a bit more about in a minute. They have a statutory role in planning, and other community groups. So I thought that might be helpful. So yeah, this came up a bit, and again in our workshops in 2018. Essentially, were access panels and community councils having conversations or attending each other's meetings? Because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think access panels tend to meet quarterly, and community councils maybe meet monthly. No, can get a shaking of heads. Sorry, Arthur. We'll come back to that. But the big point is, it may be worthwhile for access panels and community councils to band together if you're wanting to comment on planning applications, or if there's something you're very concerned about, maybe the community council could help represent your views. Not every part of Scotland has a community council. They're volunteer organisations. They have a duty to represent the views of the local community. Now, that's very difficult challenging if you've got thousands of people, but they have to do their best, and they are the only community group with a statutory role and a right to comment on planning applications and ask for extra time if they need it. So you can just Google community councils, Argyll and Bute, Highland, Moray, or whatever. So thought that was quite important. This is a diagram looking at the three functions of the council. Also, the two national parks have planning roles, but the functions that they undertake. So you could call it planning for the future, planning applications and enforcement. The planning jargon terms are development planning and development management. I'm not really going to look at enforcement today, but that is what happens if somebody has built something without planning permission or has maybe not complied with a planning condition, or what they've built is not quite in alignment with the plans. You can report that and get the council to come out and look at it. In rare occasions, they'll say that building has to be taken down or that use has to stop, but they're not there to punish. People make honest mistakes sometimes. Sometimes people play the system as well. Right, so we're going to look at development planning. So I would say the Planning Act talks about the development plan. It's the key planning concept to know, I would say, and what it means and is set out in whichever Planning Act is live at the time. So at the moment, have people heard of National Planning Framework 4? Anybody? I can't see everyone. Any hands? No? Okay. Right. Maybe, yeah, right. So National Planning Framework 4, I'll come on to in a minute, but this was the big change that the 2019 Act brought to the planning system. But the development plan equals National Planning Framework 4 plus the local development plan for your area. And why the development plan is so important is basically that's what planning officers in the council first look at when they're going to determine a planning application. They'll also take into account potentially other things called material considerations. We won't go into that today in the time that we've got. So if I'm a planning officer and I get a planning application on my desk for 1,000 houses, I'm going to have a look at how that proposal fits with what the policies what the policies in these two documents say. So National Planning Framework 4, here's a slide with quite a bit of info about that. It's a national spatial plan for Scotland. It came in 2023, so it's still quite new. And what is significant is that it has set planning policy nationally. Previously, the 32 local authorities and the two national parks wrote their own policies in their local development plans. But now, as you can see on the left, there's 13 national planning policies in National Planning Framework. There's also a lot of general, in the spatial strategy, there's a lot of general information about how the government would like Scotland to be in the next 30 years. And there's national developments, which we won't go into today, but they're big developments that kind of gain permission in principle by being in the NPF4. So previously, in an older NPF4, the new Forth Road crossing was a national development, was seen as being really important to Scotland. Just let everybody read this one. I'll shut up. Okay, so I think you can see lots of things coming through there, but the key point I'd ask everyone to take is that, I'll call it NPF4, is very much grounded in how the planning system and the decisions it makes can help address climate emergency. It was also written in the context of COVID, of course, as well. So lots of words here. We're not reading all this out, but these are the 33 topics that are covered in planning policies and National Planning Framework 4. So you can see policies 1 and 2 are very much about the climate and nature crisis. They say things like developments that have a positive impact on the climate and nature crisis should be approved. They're quite high level, but the policies are quite specific as well. Local living is a big thing that has come through in National Planning Framework 4. Are developers putting forward proposals that allow people to have access to useful, essential facilities within not everyone likes this 20-minute thing because it depends how you get around. Do you drive? Do you get the bus? Do you cycle? Do you walk? Whatever. But it's a general concept. And I don't know if anyone's from Edinburgh, but out near the airport, a big planning application has come in, I think, for 30,000 people potentially living on land out there. And the planning applications are very much saying we are going to try and meet the local living and 20-minute neighbourhood criteria. So that's quite interesting. And applicants and developers will very much try and frame their proposals saying we meet these policies. Equally, people who are objecting or commenting might be saying, interpreting the policy and saying we don't think it meets that, or we don't think it's strong enough, because policy is open to interpretation. I won't say too much more, but I'd say if you're interested, you can have a look through the NPF4 document, because it is the most important planning document in Scotland, in place for the next 10 years till it gets reviewed, but looking a lot further than that. So some of you will maybe be familiar with the local development plan. You'll remember my diagram about NPF4 plus the local development plan. So if I'm the planning officer, I'll also have to look at the local development plan. What does it say about a proposal? It's just a summary of what a local development plan does, prepared by the local council. They do have every 10 years, it used to be every 5 years, and it must allocate land for new homes. That's what tends to get controversial. Under the 2019 Act, it must look at the needs of young people, elderly people, gypsy travellers, and disabled people. And a lot of consultation and workshops will take place in preparing the local development plan. It also has planning policies which are being superseded by NPF4. That's how you can find out about getting involved. And I will say a lot of councils are going to be embarking on what we call new style local development plans this year. So look out for that. You can find a document called the Development Plan Scheme, which gives you a timetable, or sign up to the newsletter, or just get in touch with planning and ask. And I'd say it's relevant for all community groups and access panels to get involved if you've got a particular view to put across. See in local development plans this is Pitlochry. I'll show you where the big new housing sites are going to be, and that goes through a 3 or 4 year process of being, excuse me, I've got a slight cold coming on, so being consulted upon. So yeah. Obviously, if you're somebody living near to those red sites, you might be quite interested in how it's going to be. Also, if you're a developer, you might think, I would like to go and develop that site. Often it's landowners, farmers putting land forward, saying we think that should be considered for housing. And we'll just look quickly before questions and answers a bit about planning applications. Development management is what they call it in the councils, but the development management planners essentially determine planning applications and other types of application. So it's not that interesting. It's just to say there's lots of different types of planning permission. The main one you'll see is the first one, detailed planning permission, where the applicants put all the drawings and reports in, but they can also do planning permission in principle. That's just a red line around the site saying, could we have housing on that site? Could we have a shopping centre on that site? Saves them a bit of money up front if the council says no, and they haven't, paid for all the drawings. Listed building consent, changes to listed buildings. Conservation area consent doesn't come up much, only if you're demolishing a building. We won't go into the others today, but just to be aware, if you're getting involved in planning, you'll see lots of different applications, including retrospective. You are allowed to put an application in after you've started work if you haven't realised that planning permission is needed. This is really just for your interest, maybe personally, more so than access panel perspective, but can do a lot without planning permission. A lot of that's householder stuff, sheds, extensions, Velux windows, loft conversions, new windows, renewables. But you have to meet a lot of criteria if you're in a listed building conservation area or a flat, much less permitted development. Also, agricultural, farmland, telecoms, masts can go up without planning permission. It's to try and take stuff out the planning system that is important. Just to try and reduce the burden on planning authorities and also stop people having to pay fees for quite small changes to their house, because you have to pay a fee for applying for planning permission. So I'd imagine maybe some people are doing this already, but you can find out about planning applications in your local area through the weekly list. That used to be a paper document you had to go and look at, but now it's online. You just have to get onto the view planning applications bit of your local council. So this is my local council. I'm living in Edinburgh. So I would go and click on the weekly list and see what's come in. You can also, you can't see it here, you can go in through your ward, or if you know an address or a reference number, you can type in the planning reference number or the address under property. And if you want to submit comments or objections, you can do that online as well. And this is where you can submit a planning application. That's the Scottish Government's planning portal. Don't think we need to dwell on that, but if you wanted to apply for a new house or needed planning permission for something to your house, it can be done there. And then if you're looking at a planning application, this is the sort of stuff you're going to see and have to review. I mean, I think community councils and probably access panels will sometimes go through the planning list and pull out things that they feel might be relevant for them to comment on. So you're going to see the red line location plan, that's a requirement, but detailed drawings, reports, planning statements saying how it meets policy, what the benefits will be, design and access statements, only for some applications, A-listed buildings, basically applications that are in heritage areas, conservation areas, so that's quite important. We looked at them in 2018. Sometimes they were more design focused than access focused, and various other things that you might see. So you need to review all that and think, do I like it? Do I hate it? Are there good things and bad things in the application? That's just the process it goes through. I think where I've put the stars are big opportunities for community groups, access panels to get involved. The first one, the pre-application consultations, those are public events and they're only for bigger applications like 50 houses or more. The developer will have to run 2 public events where you can go along and give your views. And then of course, at neighbour notification stage, there's a 3-week window where anyone can make what we call representations. That's letters of like comments of support or objection to the planning application. And that's really what the system offers you in terms of commenting. It might not seem like much, but I guess it's better than nothing, you know, and it does show that, you know, the system invites people to put views in. If an application is refused, the developer applicant can appeal that and get a second opinion. Right, so just to finish off, I'll bring these in one by one. I think the main way community councils and maybe access panels do get involved is commenting on planning applications, but you can tell me if that's wrong after. I've already said it's important to get involved in preparing the new local development plan. So do we need more information? Is there an access, a design or other issue that we need to think about and comment on? Do we want to object, comment, or support? If you are objecting, you really need to make that clear. But I don't think people send in support that often, but I do think it's nice to do that if you like an application. Could we make suggestions for how it could be better? That's something that community groups can definitely be doing. Could we try and arrange a meeting with the developer? You can try the access panels up on, we were lucky enough to go to Harris and Lewis on our training events in 2018, and they had a good relationship with CalMac, the ferry operator, who took a big interest in the access arrangements. So that had gone quite well for the access panel up there. Should we covered this? Should we liaise with the community council? Can we reference planning policy in our representations? And importantly, what's the deadline for comments? So that's just a few thoughts. Oh, sorry. Yeah, build relationships with the planners. They'll know who the keen community councils are. And I think they would like to build relationships with access panels as well. I'd hope that is happening. This is just a final one. This is something new that the 2019 Act brought in, a right for communities to prepare their own plans called local place plans. We'd have to do a separate event on this. We're obviously really interested in it, and we're leading a few local place plans for communities. We're lucky enough to have funding in place. But I think if you happen to find out community body in your area is preparing a local place plan, it's important that a wide range of views are taken into account. So yeah, so I'll just let you look at that, but that is what I had to go through with you. Hope that was clear and hopefully useful. I have covered a lot there in a short time. I hope I've made it accessible. But we could move into, I'm happy, I think I'm here till 11, till 12 o'clock. Can extend that by 5 minutes if needed, because I've slightly gone 5 minutes over, although we didn't quite start on time. So yeah, and I mean, we'll send these out afterwards. But you can email me if things occur afterwards, or maybe you'll want to use our advice service. So I'll just unshare the screen. I'm going to say thank you for listening, and we'll see whether there's anything anybody wants to discuss.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. Yeah, I want to open up the questions to our attendees. If anybody has anything they would like to ask David or like to talk about.
I'll start it off on Callum.
Call
When you said that panels meet quarterly, we can have 5 meetings in a quarter. We have
Wow,
a
okay.
scheduled monthly meeting, but as issues arise with architects or town planners, we hold additional meetings just to speak about that one specific subject. Now, I remember taking part in something like this before. I'm not sure if it was with your group or not. We actually came through to Edinburgh to participate, and we're going through a lot of the ground we covered then. Yeah, it seems to be a repeat. You're correct that at the moment, the only statutory consultees is the Community Council. But sadly, the Community Council don't, a lot of them don't respond to planning at all. And they haven't a clue what they're commenting on when they do. Now, Jim will tell you we've been trying for a long time. I think it was Fergus Ewan was our MSP 2005, 2006 to try and get the panels acknowledged as statutory consultees. We already are consultees in planning. We're not put in with the public. When we respond to a planning application from the panel, we're not putting the public comment. We're putting under consultee comment.
Right.
Yeah. So that's two of the things. But the other one was building standards. We used to get the building standard list along with the planning list, but we no longer do it. But we've got quite a good reputation in Loch Harbour, where the building standard officer will contact us if he's got any queries about accessibility. But yeah, the national plan that came out for the government, accessibility should be one of the 33, but it's not. And we have raised this with the planning directorate.
That's good. Yeah. So you've raised that with Scottish Government.
Yeah.
Do you know if you were commenting at the time when it was? Because I mean,
it was.
It went, yeah. I mean, I don't think there is a. I think you're. I mean, you've obviously been through this. I don't think there is a policy on accessibility. I'm going to go through it again afterwards and just.
Well, there is, but it's very vague.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same with most things. For disability, you have to fight to get to the table. We should be there as a matter of course. You know, a lot of organisations said, "Oh, with a great success today, we got to the table." Well, that's not a success. We should be there from the very start.
Yeah. And you sound like, I mean, I made the point about try and build relationships with planners. I mean, sometimes people laugh when I say that, but you've actually done that, and with building standards, which does that reflect other people's experience? I'm going to put this back to the group. Does that reflect other people's experience of planning and building standards? And actually, Arthur, the event in Edinburgh, we did Ayr, Western Isles, Dundee, and Inverness in our 2018 group. So that wouldn't have been our event, I don't think. But
it was round about then, you know.
Yeah, but fair enough. You've heard some of what I've said before, so that's fine. But yeah, what about other people's experience with planning applications, councils, building standards? I just wonder if anyone wants to say anything there.
I'll do a quick one since I'm a neighbour of Arthur's. We get good feedback, possibly from the head planning officer for the council area. It doesn't always filter down to those that you have to deal with on a daily basis, or a weekly basis. So it's fine. The organ grinder is on board, but the monkeys aren't.
Okay.
And with regard to building control, well, I think the building control officer locally has difficulty speaking to his colleagues, never mind anybody else. So I'll say no more on that.
Yeah, I mean, I've had people in our advice service recently that have got issues with access and roads matters relating to planning applications, and the planning will always take advice from the roads officers in the council, but I think it's quite difficult to speak to somebody in the roads department, you know, through a planning application.
Personally, I don't have that problem because that's my background. So yeah. I usually, but it's just horses for courses, isn't it?
Yeah. See, Annie,
yes,
can we bring in? I'll hear from Annie actually.
Yeah. Edinburgh Access Panel.
Hi.
I think our least good relationship is actually with the planning section, partly because we're not treated as the statutory consultee. We meet every month, so obviously sometimes we miss the chance to comment on an application because the deadline has gone, and yet ideally we'd be talking with our group first. And we don't, although we have somebody from planning on who attends our access panel, we don't really have any contact with, someone nearer the top, I would say. So it's a bit unsatisfactory.
Right. You've got a huge planning department in Edinburgh,
Yes.
of course, and a
Yes.
huge number of planning applications to deal
Yes.
with. Brief comment on your point about the timescales, because I'm on a break, but I was on my community council for years,
Oh, right.
and eventually I think they set up a planning subgroup who would, in order to be a bit more flexible in responding to deadlines, and they would just do it. But there was a period when I think a lot of emails were going round. But if you've maybe agreed some criteria, like they had a big issue with lots of hot food takeaways opening in the bit of Edinburgh where I live, and they would just automatically object. I wouldn't run it past everyone. I mean, there's obviously some relationship there. I don't know if you should just write to. I mean, one thing is you won't find planning officer names or emails anymore on the website, so you have to ask around to find out who the. I mean, I can tell you. Do you know who the head of planning is in Edinburgh? Or?
Is it David Given?
It is. Wait a minute. It's David. I think it's David Given. Yeah.
Yes.
But. I mean, the community councils have a liaison officer as a point of contact, but I guess you have to work a bit harder to build that.
I think we will have to. We'll maybe be in touch with a community council, one of them within Edinburgh. Yeah.
Okay. So, what have we got?
Another question,
Arthur. Yeah.
It wasn't a question, Colin. It was more because plan application deadlines can fall in between our meetings. What we do is we do a subgroup of 6 or 7 of our members, and we circulate the plan application to them. We make a comment before the deadline, which enables us to get them ratified at the next meeting, and we can always amend the original comment, if there's a wider view coming in. So it is important you get it in time, but there's nothing to stop subgroups. That's what we do. We do it by email.
Yeah.
With the Highland planning application, the weekly list, the planning officer's name and contact details are there. The email address and the phone number are there. And I don't know if everybody's the same, but I know the list we get from Highland Council every week, the name is there.
Yeah. I mean, you can ask them for what you want. We did community council training in Western Bartonshire, and it was great because about 5 planning officers came along. This was all day on Saturday, and it turned out people weren't getting the information they needed, which the planning officers were amazed at. So I always say, if you don't ask, you don't get. I'm going to ask another question then. Have you had the chance to get involved in the local development plan consultations and being asked for your views or putting views? Arthur's nodding, and Edinburgh people are nodding, because you've just gone through there's a new local development plans about to be with government ministers, I think, at the moment in Edinburgh. But just interested, how did people find that, or have you not been able to have capacity to do that? Do you know what's happening with your local development plan in the area? Because if there's not a policy in NPF4 that you think is good enough in accessibility, you can have a go at saying, can we get something into the local development plan? Not promising you it'll happen, but what the legislation says is that bear with me, so all the policies on this, all those policy subjects will come out the local development plan that we saw in NPF4. But if the council thinks they need or want a different policy, or a new policy, they can have that in. So Aberdeen Council's always had a policy on granite buildings, for example. You're not going to find that in NPF4, but it's really important to them. So I imagine they'll keep that written into their new LDP. I will be quiet. You know, I was asking you a question. So local development plan.
Can I butt in a minute?
Yeah, thanks, Godfrey.
Oh, I'm from South Ayrshire, and they just started up a new panel. Come live and end of January there, and we've got a town centre renovation in Maybowl, which is in the consultant period. We're supposed to be getting another one-to-one consultation through Zoom, I build there, what's on there, but they're redesigning the high street in Maybowl, and that's public walkways and two-way traffic and traffic calming, which seems a bit, well, looks a bit what's on there. I don't think they've taken in consult if the main road should get closed for any reason at all, that the traffic might be rerouted through Maybowl as it used to come. But we aren't hardly up and running fully yet.
Right.
So
If
could you
you
give
want
us
a bit
any
more-
advice
yeah.
on such things as that there?
I mean, if you want a bit more support than today with planning, you know, we could speak through our advice service, or maybe do a one-to-one event with your group. I mean, there's a lot of these town centre. This is possibly not just being led by planning, what you're talking about, and it may not be planning applications. It may be roads, you know, roads applications, which is different. It doesn't mean you're not right to be involved. It just means I'm not expert on it. But it is, I'd imagine, access. I mean, if you look at what's happened to Leith Walk in Edinburgh, like that's not been done. I'm going to give an opinion, not really meant to, but I don't think it's been done brilliantly from the point of view of access, although they've tried to deal with trams, pedestrians and cycle routes. But I think these street redesign projects, and we talk about, you'll hear active travel a lot, that's probably a central area for access panels to be involved in, but it's not necessarily strictly planning, possibly.
Right.
Yeah.
You're saying it's not, but it is. It's to do with the town planning development, and that should all come under the scheme, you know?
You're right, it's about a place, but I'm just saying, sorry, on you go.
Yeah, because drop curbs, ramps, things like this, and we always ask the developers to have a meeting with us so we can ensure that the appropriate level of drop curbs is putting in, ramps and everything else, you know, so that is essential.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, I guess the point I was trying to make was rerouting roads, doing drop curbs, changing parking goes through as traffic regulation orders rather than planning applications.
Yeah, but
It doesn't really matter, actually. Yeah.
Well,
But yeah.
that's where it is. I mean, I might need to zoom on this now.
Any other specific questions? I mean, while we've got a few minutes left before I pass back to Callum, anything that was really unclear that I said, or anything you just don't understand about planning? Because it's never any stupid questions in planning. That's what I always say. It's quite opaque.
The only
Yes,
other question
that's
I've got, I'd like a recording, or what's the name of this meeting?
No problem, Godfrey. I'll be
No, it's
sending
been
that across.
recorded.
Aye, I'll be sending that across once it's edited and stuff. A couple of weeks'
Okay.
time or something like that.
Jim pointed out that he was ex-Roads, and we had a fantastic relationship with the member of staff who covered Loch Harbour after Jim. And sadly, she's retired. And we're finding that in all the departments now, that we're finding it very difficult to get communication with, well, quite often they're not being replaced. And that includes in planning as well, up in headquarters. You know, so that makes it more difficult for us.
Okay, thanks.
Hello, I'm Ricky Pollock, and I'm also on the Edinburgh Access panel. I put in comments on Edinburgh's local plan. The main one being about the proportion of housing that is accessible. In other words, only the public sector has to provide. The private sector is only having to provide to building standards. And I asked Edinburgh Council to allocate every major development should have a number proportion as they do for affordable. And it's log jammed the system that the planners and central government took it up and asked Edinburgh to respond, which they did with no commitment. So I said, still not answered. So it's still out there, but I don't know if perhaps more access panels asked for the same thing. So 5% of all new houses should be accessible to some standard or another.
That is hard to do in the private sector, but what we do is ask that all private housing is made accessible, adaptable. So if the person that's building the house knows their requirements at that specific time, but if somebody's in a car crash, becomes disabled, well, the house should be easily adaptable. You know?
Yep.
I'm very sorry we have to leave now. We've got another thing with Living Streets with Daisy Narahan. So
No problem.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Guys. Should we wrap it up at this point, Callum, just because everyone wants away probably at 12 o'clock anyway?
Well, sorry, was somebody away to talk there? Well, thank you everybody for coming along. Thank you, David, again for the presentation. It's been very insightful. Thanks again to our captioner, Carol, for providing closed captioning. I will be releasing the slides as well as the recording of today's session at a later time. And if you have any questions, get in touch with either myself or with David if you have any more questions for him. Yeah, thanks again for coming, and hope to see you in the next one.
Just before we go, David, if you ever want to come to Loch Harbour, open invitation.
Thank
You
you
can
very
come
much.
and see how we do things.
Whereabouts are you exactly?
And Fort William.
Fort William, nice. Yeah, amazing area. I get round. I don't get any foreign trips in this job, but I do get. I've been to I've been to Applecross, Skye, Barra, Harris and Lewis. You know, so that's been over 15 years, I might add. So I'm mainly sat here in Edinburgh or going to Glasgow and stuff. But yeah, it's good what you're doing, though. Yeah,
we'd be glad to see you.
You know, we've got a bit of a, I think we've we've got the relationship between the two organisations. So we're always happy to come out and do, I mean, you had a training budget back in 2018, Callum, but we're always happy to come out and do these 1 hour events. So, and tell people about us, as well, because word of mouth.
No problem, absolutely.
Useful.
Thanks again for coming.
Cheers. I'll just stay on if you want a quick debrief, Callum.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
not,
no problem.